Hey
How's it
Nate,
going?
how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure connecting with you today.
Mine as well. And just so I'm sure, is your name pronounced Favor?
Favor.
Favor. Okay, good to know.
Yeah, it's a
Cool.
pleasure meeting you. I looked at your profile. Shout out to Podmatch, and I was like, this is very interesting. This is dynamic, and it's a beautiful story because everybody's unique, and that's why I love the way we're able to impact and inspire with stories. It's about the context, not just what is going on around. So it's really good to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored. I'm excited. So absolutely.
Anytime, anytime. I know like people will probably wonder, okay, who's this, and everything. It would be lovely to have your introduction and let us know more about you and who you are and what you do.
Certainly. I'll just dive in. And again, thank you. So I have been like a lifelong obsessed entrepreneur and self-employed person, and even at a couple of times in my life a business owner. And this started at a pretty early age. Like even before I graduated high school, I realized like I want to do my own thing. I was looking at like various career paths, and it's like none of those interest me. I just don't feel that that's the right path for me. So as soon as I went to college, I realized that if I'm gonna really make it as a business owner, um, I actually don't really need a college degree. So I started thinking about dropping out, and it was actually a really easy decision for me to make because I hated college. I was super depressed. I hardly had any friends because even though I was someone who kind of had a lot of ambitions to be an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
I came from a very distant, cold, unloving home with parents who were just not really equipped to raise children. So I grew up as like a pretty angry, socially awkward kid, and I really got depressed at an early age and started like burying all that. So the one like glimmer of hope in my life was being an entrepreneur. So I actually ended up dropping out of college, and this is around the early 2000s. It was what was it like 2005, 2006, kind of that time of around that time. So the internet was still, I mean, it's of course still exploding today. It's still growing, but back then it was more like the wild, wild west. And I started studying, well, how can I start a business that's actually based online? And that's when I started running into a lot of like really amazing experiences, but also a lot of challenges because I was learning about advertising, I was learning about writing, but I had no idea how to build a proper business with solid foundations that one would probably learn in school. And at the same time, I wasn't dealing with a lot of my inner problems. So I was still a pretty depressed, like inwardly angry person. And I was developing a talent for advertising and marketing, but those two were starting to clash. So I got more depressed. I actually started drinking every morning. And the short version, we can get into more detail, but the short version is I actually went through a bankruptcy. I had a falling out with two business partners in one venture I had where they basically kicked me out of the business. And eventually I ended up like, if you've ever seen like people like out on the street, not the street, but street corner, like in goofy costumes, spinning signs around to get attention for a business, I actually got a job doing that. And it was supposed to be a temporary like 3-month gig, but I ended up like working that job for, let's say, around 3 years. So that's kind of where that's the short version of like where I came from.
Wow.
Yeah.
That just took me to a completely different place where now you realize that communication, storytelling, marketing, creating that comparison, what is a behavior, what is a pattern, it helps with, creating that balance, the work-life balance, because you can get stressed as an entrepreneur. That's one of the things they don't tell you. And the more stressed you get, the more you think, am I really doing it the right way? And sometimes you're right, but it's really not working. But you have to be the one to dig through that and see, okay, what could be right?
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. It makes me think of how it's like, as an entrepreneur, you can get such tunnel vision during that focus. And it's funny what you say. It's like sometimes you can be right, and it's that basically that inner strength to be able to believe in yourself that you're correct, that is required for entrepreneurial success. But it could be a disaster if it turns out you're wrong. So yes, it's like this tunnel vision and this focus and this obsession as an entrepreneur or business owner has to be combined with an openness to like the proper kind of feedback,
right?
Which I did not have at all. Yeah.
Wow. So from where you had that entrepreneurship mentality and taking it into the marketing space with the inbound marketing strategies you're able to do, and understanding what the culture of creating consistent workflow of messaging is important for your business to grow. When you think about that, and now, how does that fuel your growth and take you to where you actually want to be right now?
That's a great question. Right. So looking back with all I've learned, I realized that the importance of creating just a great experience for the customer and then having a one-to-one ongoing communication with the customer, I did not get how amazing that is and how valuable that is. And I didn't get how when you're able to do that, the numbers, in terms of like your numbers of customers, you don't need to have a large number of customers to start with if
right.
you're creating those experiences. Because when I was like 10 years ago, this is going back like 10 years, again, this was like the wild west of the internet, advertising rates were a lot lower. And I was the type that I would just I would take my credit card, and if I had $5,000 of available credit on it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to run an ad to like this email list of people who get news, daily news, and I could run an ad on that. And I would actually make back a profit. And I would think to myself, well, that's great. That's super cool. I made a profit. Maybe there are other like email newsletters out there I can advertise in. Not realizing this isn't just something I tried where, okay, that worked and I made a profit. This is a resource where there are people who resonate with my message. So I can keep coming back to it. Not only that, but the people that are now kind of in my business, that are in my wheelhouse, that have actually done a transaction with me, I should now be devoting 80% of my effort to them.
Right.
Because, I just didn't get that. I figured it's like, well, yeah, of course, you get a great product and all that, and sometimes you'll keep in touch with them, but that should have been like my number one priority, is like, I can now develop a culture, and these people, they can be my first word of mouth customers. I just didn't understand that.
That's deep. I think there's this mindset that if I don't have X amount of people, then I can't be able to perform Y number of services, because now you're equating the mass to your problem solving solution. But if one person has not experienced it, then how are you going to manage 10? Yeah. 10 years ago, I just did not understand that. I even have a couple of friends today who are entrepreneurs, and they're not getting it. I was talking to one friend who, well, he is getting it, but we had to talk about it a bit, where I was like, he was trying to hire someone, and he wanted to just step away from the hiring process entirely. And it's like, well, I have a team that can start doing that thing for me, because talking for himself, he's like, because I wasn't able to do that effectively. I'm like, I understand the logic behind that, but
you still need to work on yourself and be able to do that even before you can just start spreading it into someone else and have the numbers take care of themselves.
Yeah.
It's almost like trying to dodge that responsibility. It's almost like, well, if I have like this much venture capital funding, that won't be an issue anymore. It's like, but like you said, you have to be able to do it with one person before 10 or more.
Exactly. And that's when you realize that the concept of creating that authenticity is important, because you can literally copy paste Wikipedia. You can literally do the same thing. But I think you can also decide to create that experience that is unique. And that's why they keep coming back. Because when your bounce rates go low, then you know that you have a good click-through rate that can really give you your optimum conversion value.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people are just like, well, let me try and figure out which tactic I'll use to improve the numbers today. Which, I mean, it can be, of course, in business we need tactics. It can be very valuable, except sometimes we miss the bigger picture. Well, it's like you and I talking right now. It's just like we're just riffing. So
right.
It creates a better, more unique experience where more interesting things come out. And if either one of us, if we didn't know what we were talking about, the riffing would not work.
Exactly.
It would not work real fast, real quick.
Exactly.
People would be like, "What?"
You're like, "What did he say?"
Where's the script?
Exactly. Like, so true. It's amazing to see how like there's a balance, and it helps too, because at the same time you don't want to sound so robotic. Because some people don't like being sold to, and that's the moment they realize, okay, I know this guy. So you don't want to be that guy either. So you got to be like, what are you really bringing to the table that is worthy of my time? Because if I'm spending 5 minutes with you, I could be doing 5 minutes doing something else.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and I guess I don't have really any more. I can't really think of any more thoughts on that, other than that it's easy to forget that everyone is pretty smart when it comes to things like that. Everyone's pretty savvy, because this is 2021. This isn't 500 years ago when it was a little bit tougher to nail out marketing or something like that. We're just inundated with it. So yeah.
Exactly. That makes a lot of sense. When you think about the goal habits and the goal settings, what would you say, and why would you think goal setting can actually set people up for failure?
And this is just my experience. So if someone has set goals and it's worked for them, I'm not going to interfere with that. Ignore what I have to say, because if it works for someone, it works. That's the ultimate test. In my experience, when I was younger, I would set goals for myself. And the trouble is, I would kind of like put the energy into what that would feel like, how awesome that would be. And it was kind of like I almost felt good in advance, and it kind of drained my motivation to do it. But even then, I would still push myself toward the goal. But it was interesting because everything I wrote down as a goal, and I'd always like do the whole thing, I'd write it down, I'd tape it to the wall or something. It was an external that involved things I could not control. Like it would be a revenue figure or something like that. It would be a revenue figure, or I also had like health and fitness goals. So like lifting a certain amount of weight, or weighing a certain amount, like putting on a certain amount of muscle.
Yeah. And
as I the days would go by and I'd get closer to this deadline I set for a goal, because I made it all specific and stuff like that. I would get anxious because I wasn't like seeing how I could achieve it. So I ended up, this was in my 20s, I ended up like not really ever achieving a single goal that I wrote down and set for myself, which made me more discouraged. So years later, after I went bankrupt, I started focusing instead on what are my daily disciplines, what are my daily habits. And I even today, back then to today, I have intentions where I want to build a really amazing business where I'm an author. And I could see like, oh, okay, I started looking at numbers in terms of like roughly how many books am I selling? And I was like, oh, maybe I can kind of inch that up over time. And wouldn't it be cool if like this? And I put a lot of my energy into strategy. But after I put my energy into my daily disciplines and my daily habits and thinking about strategy, I kind of let the goal take care of itself. It reminds me, I think it was John Wooden, I think. You can anyone can look it up, the basketball coach. He said, let the scoreboard take care of itself. So he was talking about goal setting. He would make sure he has a great team. He does a great job coaching them. And they're going to go off and they're going to play their hearts out on the court. And if they do, there's a good chance that they're going to achieve their goals. So the scoreboard's going to take care of itself. And I have a group of friends who are entrepreneurs, and we get together regularly. And one day we actually asked, we went around the table. It's like, do you guys set goals? And they're like, every single person was like, I'm kind of more into like, what are my strategies and what am I doing as a discipline day to day to build my business? And they put more energy to that than into goals.
I think the key word you mentioned too is the discipline, because it can be a task or it could be a passion.
Yeah. People run from that word. But disciplines can be intertwined with passion, because it's like, how do you feel about the idea of discipline? For some people, it feels like they're getting trapped, or it's like uncomfortable. It's like, oh no. Or other people, it's like, no. My disciplines are an extension of who I'm creating as a person.
Exactly.
Like, I am that person who can like be the hardest working person on my team and inspire my team as a result. Like, that's a discipline, and it's energizing. It's all about like, how do people relate to that idea?
Exactly. And this also even brings me to the next question too, about like why it's so difficult to break out of unhealthy habits, and how we can focus on actually finally doing it than thinking it.
Oh, that's a good question. I found with most people and myself, like I went through all this too. I made these mistakes too. We come to a place where we want to like just end an unhealthy habit, and we get like excited about it emotionally, and we try and just like use our mind power to just kind of block it out and not like do the habit anymore. It could be avoiding work by checking social media on your phone or something like that, or a habit where we we want to get up earlier to work on our own business while we still have a daytime gig, something like that. And I've often like seen this happen, and I've done this where we're just like, oh, I'm just not going to do that anymore, or I am going to do this. But that I always fell back to my usual routine, because my brain was already wired to feel comfortable with that habit. So there are two things that really worked for me, and it's kind of counterintuitive, because the first is, I'll set the stage of the story. When I was in my early to mid-20s, I started a daily meditation practice, and without knowing it, I actually set the stage for a lifelong healthy habit, and it was the most consistent thing I've like ever done. And here's how I set the stage for it. So I used to drink every morning. I used to drink alcohol like in the morning in my early 20s. Like I'd get up, I'd pour myself this much vodka. Well, it varied, and I'm holding up my fingers here. Like,
wow.
Little bitches. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a big glass, but it's vodka in the morning. There's no small amount, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then I'd mix it with like an energy drink.
Wow.
I was in a bad place. So I would do that every morning, and that was like my breakfast. So I started this daily meditation practice, and the way I did it was I would get up. I mean, it was the morning, or sometimes it was it was like early afternoon. I mean, my life was pretty much a mess, but it was my morning. I would get up, take a shower, and then normally I would start drinking. But instead of drinking, I would do 60 seconds of this meditation. And then I would go have a drink. I still drank. So eventually I added like 5 seconds a day, 10 seconds a day, up to 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Because, hey, you know, I've been doing it and 5 minutes is easy and I can go drink afterwards. Well, fortunately, I started feeling so good from the meditating that the alcohol didn't draw me as much until one day I took a drink after meditating and I didn't feel any better. I didn't feel my usual like, I feel all warm and confident now. I don't feel nearly as sad. Instead, I just felt more drunk. And then I'm like, I wonder how this is going to progress. Like, maybe the drinking will actually make me feel worse. Well, like within a day or two, the drinking actually made me feel worse than I did in the morning before I did it. So I stopped drinking, and it was based purely on it didn't feel as good. So I just didn't touch. It took no willpower. I just didn't touch the stuff anymore. I had the vodka bottle in my freezer, but I just didn't touch it. So without knowing it, I had built up a new habit in like, I think it's one of the most perfect ways. I took this new habit, I started small, and I sandwiched it right before a habit I had already ingrained in myself. And I just said, hey, look, before I do this thing, this drinking, I'm going to do this one good thing. And then I just let it build up. So eventually the good habit got more and more and more ingrained until eventually the training wheels could come off and I could just stick with it. And then eventually it like overpowered the drinking. So
wow,
that's like my number one sort of nitty gritty strategy. And and to give like full credit, I think the book Atomic Habits reveals something like this. Now I went through this like before that book was published, but when I read Atomic Habits, I'm like, oh yeah, this author nailed it. And he shows there's even scientific evidence that this is true, and it's a great way to change human behavior. So for anyone who has like a bad habit they don't like, but that it's kind of nice, like they have a tasty food that they eat, I would figure out how to sandwich in a good habit right before that, and take advantage of the fact that you've got something that draws you in and that you it's an indulgence. So that's like my nitty-gritty way of doing it. And the second thing is like also figure out a way to tie it to your identity, because it's very powerful to really feel as though I'm like, quote, I am a person who such and such. When you're the kind of person, like we identify ourselves as like business owners or entrepreneurs or self-employed people, like that identity is so powerful that we're not going to like lose the drive and go get a day job. It's very, very unlikely because we would be betraying our very identity. So when you combine that with the nitty gritty, I think it's extremely powerful.
That's a perfect way you put it, because now it makes sense that when somebody's confused about, I didn't do this because I didn't have time to. Now, when you think about putting that sandwich of, okay, let me just read one book or one chapter, or let me think about doing what I'm doing differently, you know. I asked the question one time, I was like, when was the last time you did something for the first time? And it's like, huh? Like, what? And I was like, yeah.
That's cool.
You know?
I'm asking myself that now. That is kind of, whoa. That is a cool question.
Yeah.
That's a super cool question.
You know, and it just makes me wonder, like, when I asked that question randomly, I didn't think of it. I think it was random. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's true. So if I did do something, because you go to your favorite restaurant, you know exactly what you want. They probably even know what you came for, you know, so it's that obvious. So sometimes you got to change your paradigm shifts, you know, understand that there are things that if you try differently, you could probably get a peanut butter jelly sandwich, you know, different from something that you're ready with butter on, you know, so you can get that different taste bud that gives you like, okay, maybe that wasn't that bad. But if you're not willing to take those hours and sleep late and wake up very early in the morning, then you're never gonna know the process that it took, because people are enjoying those things and they thought, I just flipped this overnight. they probably spend nights without eating because they just did not want to figure out this and enjoy without getting that relief of, I found out what it is and I'm excited because I took the time to take that patience in.
Yeah, that is really cool. I'm gonna start asking myself that question too. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's deep. When you think about it, like, it makes you wonder, like, so what? And then the thing is, you don't have the answer because it's not that direct. So it's like you have to really think about, and then you start going back and you're like, oh, I remember when I did this for the first time, but what else happened after that? You know, like, is there a result? Is there effect? Is there a drawback? What is that friction? What is causing that reaction?
Yeah, and it's also like it's really valuable to hear that because people often forget the power of just asking themselves questions. You know, a lot of people don't get that question because your questions, the type of questions you ask yourself, will really drive new behavior and kind of making those new connections. You know, I think oftentimes when we do something for the first time, it's driven by a question often. It's driven by a very good question. Like, I wonder what else, I wonder how easily I could actually get something better. You know?
That's a fact.
That's cool.
It's a fact. It's really, really interesting because, like, for me too, like, you know, I pray every day and I'm very, you know, I take that seriously, you know, because I know that there's some things that you can't do without, and if you do without that, then you're on your own, and it's bad to be lonely. It's bad to be, you know, disproportional to what you're actually supposed to be aligned to. So it gets that mindset of being in practice, in consistency, and that consistency just gets you to where you're going. And if you think about patterns and, you know, self-sabotage, because people also have this imposter syndrome. It happens. It's not a joke. Like, sometimes, like, yeah, okay, I didn't work out, but yay, I watched a workout video on, you know, Pinterest. You know, it's like, guys, really wake up. It's not about what you're seeing. It's about you implying that. And once you take that habit, and it talks about 21 days to have a habit, you know, and I'm like, oof. If it's 21 days, then within 7 days, have I made that impact? Because by the time it's 21 days, you should be feeling normal.
Ooh, could you repeat the last 5 seconds there? You broke up a bit. I'm sorry.
Okay, I was saying within the last, like, between 21 days, right, of having that meditation practice or being inconsistent with that value that you're bringing, that if you're praying every day, if you're being mindset, goal driven, and you know what you're doing, don't you think that by the time you're done with the first 7 days, by the 21st day, it should be normal?
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks for repeating that. Connection dropped for a second. You know,
no problem.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some. I don't keep up, like, with the latest research because some, like, I think there's some sites are like 60 days or 3 days or something like that where it gets. But I do know, like, the more days that go by, the deeper it's going to get lodged into you. Well, actually, and speaking of identity, the more days go by, the more it transitions to being who you are. You know, because. And a lot of that's probably your choice, too, because it's just like, if you meditate for 1 day, or you pray for a day, and then you do it the next day, and the next day, and the next day, at a certain point, you get to decide, I am a person who prays. I am a person who meditates. I am a person who does this. So, and it's kind of like the snowball effect. So, yeah, I mean, the difference, and probably... in my experience, the biggest profound difference is between day 1 and 2. Because how many times have we done something for 1 day, or did it once in that day, and then just dropped it? So I think,
true.
You know, so in my experience, it's like if you make it 2 days, boy, you're probably halfway there or something like that, something or more. So that's been my experience.
Exactly. That's a very true fact, because now it makes it confirm that, hey, I'm going to work out every day of this week, and if I don't do it, I'll feel bad, but I should feel better because I know that this 1 hour is taking away from my 23 hours, which when I come back, I'm still able to capitalize on the 5 hours or the 6 hours I was able to do in a week. Now you think about the longevity, and that goes in branding, that goes in marketing, that goes in identity. You talked about that. So now when somebody's listening to this podcast, they're wondering, okay, what did I do? Why am I not doing it? How does someone think through that and get out of that pattern of thinking the same way and putting them on a pedestal that equates what they've been actually visualizing, like you said, putting the celebration last because that's what you're going to get as an end result?
Yeah, and in fact, what you mentioned, where someone might think to themselves, why am I not doing this? Again, the power of questions. They could flip that to, I wonder when is the best time today to actually squeeze in a minute. Because now you're directing your brain to give you an answer. Your brain will give you an answer. It always will give you an answer. So I might as well feed it a question that helps me. So actually, and that's something that me and my wife will often ask ourselves. We'll be like, "Ooh, I wonder when like such and such this good thing is really going to happen."
Yeah.
So it's once you start thinking about this stuff, it's almost shocking and scary how like easily we can kind of bury ourselves deeper, as opposed to just asking yourselves these more like helpful questions that will actually carve out possibilities. The difference is so slight. It's amazing.
A little goes a long way.
Yeah. It's always a little goes a long way. It's amazing. It's so cool.
It is. Think about your food. If you put a lot of salt, are you going to eat that food?
Yeah, it's like just a little bit of spices, and there's a whole dish. There's all kinds of stuff. It's like, no. Or a fly landing in the noodles. It's like, there's a whole drink in there. Look at this glass. It's like, no.
Yeah, you're fine. That's a good one. Exactly. It just makes everything more focused on what do you really want. Do you want to jump in this pool with your clothes on? Or do you want to swim across and figure out that, there's something that's on the shore that you can actually enjoy because you now have a vision, you have a perspective, and you have that tenacity, which most entrepreneurs don't seem to practice as a human skill.
Oh, that's a good point. The idea that you can practice tenacity too, because I think a lot of people, that falls into the category of just like, well, some people just have it and others don't. But again, it goes back to identity and habits. It's like, what if you start thinking, you start doing things every day and built up a few days of doing it, all of a sudden you can tell yourself, wait, that's tenacity. I must be a tenacious person. It's been built. So yeah, practicing it.
Exactly.
Sum it up like in 3 words there, yeah.
Exactly. And if you think about it too, like, people quit so fast. People quit, like you said, tenacity. If somebody's not enabled to say, okay, if I can't work out for this number of days and I fall back for the rest of the month, how do I not quit so that I'm not inconvenienced? Because now at this point, I'm thinking about the risk factor. I have to wake up, I have to dress up, I have to drive there or walk there or jog there. Like, you put like 10 different blocks before you even do the first one. So how do you stop someone from quitting when they know they need to do something?
Well, I think I found a couple of things to be helpful. One is you actually hinted at when you mentioned, like, first I have to, if they're going to go somewhere, it's like I have to get in my car and drive. I have to probably put on my workout clothes. One thing I found helpful is to just take the step forward in terms of, let me just put on my workout shorts. Just let me just put on my workout shorts.
Exactly.
And then once those are on, okay, let me go out And it sounds silly, but this is actually, I've experienced this, and I've also read accounts from people who went through some tremendously difficult training in the military. And what they found, both for themselves and others who made it through the training, was they kept their focus on the immediate time ahead of them. So they didn't think about, I have to go through the next 7 days of this hell. They thought, all right, let me do another minute here. And I know at some point we're going to be able to get a glass of water or something, or a bottle of water. So it's breaking this down. I used to do this with workouts where I'm just like, once I started the workout, like I used to run up and down stairs. That's tough. I used to be like, all right, let me run up this one flight. I'm just going to run up the flight. Can I run up the flight? Yeah, sure, fine. And when I get to the top, okay, one more. All right, one more. So that's a really, that really helped me a lot. And you might, someone might hear that and be like, oh, come on, you can't just like, I know what I'm doing, but it still works. It still works. And the other key, I think, on a kind of a bigger picture level is like, I have had very little success with doing anything new and being consistent and like not quitting. If it was only every couple of days or 4 days a week or 3 days a week, I've had a terrible time making that work. And that was true with exercise. So I exercise right now daily. It's a short workout, and the reason I do it is because I know that if it's not daily, 3 days a week will turn into 2. 2 days a week will turn into 1, which will very quickly turn into I just forgot about it. So exactly. As a writer, I do daily writing, and I don't take the weekends off. Now I'm not working like 12 hours a day, but on like a Saturday, and I enjoy my work, so I know that the consistency is what's going to keep me going. So I think distance from the activity is what makes people quit. And one more thing, actually, I would say is that it's not very fun to admit, but oftentimes the biggest driving force behind a person quitting is their friends. The friendships they have, or if they're super close with their relatives, because we all like want to be close with people and just be in a good relationship with the people around us. And if all of a sudden developing a good habit interferes with that relationship, it's a disaster. There could be so much tension. So if you don't want to quit, a big answer to that is to be around friends who don't quit either.
Exactly. And it's hard to find those friends too, because you gotta try to find out. It's not like, oh, you won last week, okay, come on board, like, come on.
It's the toughest and probably the most worthwhile thing. So yeah, you're right. Oh, it is so tough. So good people that's why in the business realm and the personal realm, good people are just the most valuable asset.
Exactly. When you think about growing out of your comfort zone, people don't see that, because if you're growing out of your comfort zone, then you can't, like, imagine if you still lived or still like was in the same bed when you were like 3 years old. You're not gonna fit in that bed. Not because you know what I'm saying, it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with what is your current state, what is your current vision. Do you see that bigger light? Do you see that bigger tunnel? Can you fit in? You have to measure it up to cut it according to your size. Just be very specific, and that way you can be able to know that success is around the corner. But when you think about putting those perspectives in practice to what you actually do, it's said that to be more successful, you need to get out of your comfort zone. So why do people have such a huge problem? But they can clearly not sleep on that bed, but you have a problem with, the analogy of that comfort zone. How does that play a role in what we do?
That's a great question. I love the bed analogy because it's perfect, because you could see that. Just be like, well, of course I would see how I outgrow something and how I need to make a change and get a different bed. But the trouble with as adults with our habits and our perspectives on life, and the people around us, is that our brains are so trained to make sure that we feel relatively relaxed and comfortable within those same habits and routines. I mean, it even comes down to like the amount of dopamine we feel, or the amount of like the stressful cortisol we feel. Our brain wants us to make sure, or wants to make sure that we feel comfortable within these same mindsets and within these same habits. So, and I say relatively relaxed because oftentimes we'll have this certain level of chronic tension, but we'll feel comfortable within that tension. So it can be difficult to break out of that, because our brains are literally telling us, no, this is right. No, this is okay. This old belief pattern, it's not an old belief pattern. It's the truth. It's simply, it's true. I've tried everything, and so it would be as weird as, actually, and this is a cool exercise. Like like when it comes to brushing my teeth in the morning, I will use my right hand. Like that's my default. Like when I was like a 5-year-old through 15-year-old or whatever, for 10 straight years, I used my right hand to brush my teeth. Very comfortable. It was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago or something, I got some interesting advice, which is to try switching your hand and try using your other hand, your non-dominant toothbrushing hand, and even use your non-dominant hand to apply the toothpaste onto the brush. Oh boy, does that feel weird. You almost drop it, or at least I did. I almost dropped it because it was so awkward. Yeah. And all of a sudden when you're brushing, you're like worried because you might hit your gum and you might hit your cheek. So it feels so awkward and strange. That's exactly what getting out of your comfort zone is going to feel like. So that's what, on top of the fear involved. We all understand getting out of your comfort zone involves fear. So on top of the fear is the sheer awkwardness of it. So that's why I'm a big fan of, if you're going to step out of your comfort zone, give yourself as much self-care as possible and do baby steps whenever you can. If someone's had success just busting out of their comfort zone and going hog wild, okay, go for it, because you have a pattern of success for you. That's the ultimate proof. But I've found personally, for me and for most people, it's give yourself the time, give yourself the baby steps, and treat it almost like stretching. You would stretch pretty gently within your body's limitations and expand your comfort zone that way. And that way you give your brain time to be like, okay, this is okay. Okay, we're not going to die. This is okay. And all of a sudden, you're just like you would find immediately that a bed that's too small for you just couldn't fit it anymore. If you expand easily like that, it's sort of like automatically lengthening the bed and getting used to the idea that you can have that expansion. Because once you get used to the idea that you can't expand your comfort zone, well, it's like going from 1 day to 2. Now you can just keep adding on days.
Exactly. And I was even thinking about that whole opportunity and analysis approach, because what came to my mind was that imagine someone that actually wants to expand, and let's say it's like with cars, for example, like you want to have a Tesla, but the environment you are, the nearest filling station or recharge station is probably 30 minutes away. So when you think about like, do I want to make that extra, it's like you want to make that, but at the same time you want it so bad. So it's like when you expand and you actually can compare where you are to what you're doing, it's now 5 minutes away or probably in the backyard, because now you've been able to build a resource that is now able to give you that capacity,
Yeah. Just another example for me personally that's similar to that is the idea of doing podcasts. Like this is, I've been doing this for I don't know how long, but I remember maybe a couple of months ago, several weeks ago, it was my first one, or at least my first one in a while. I've done them sporadically over the years.
Okay.
So that's out of my comfort zone. So that was just like, geez, this is it's like a mentally distant thing. It's like that recharge station being so far away. But now that I've done many of them, it's like, oh yeah, that's just that thing in my backyard. It's like, oh yeah, no problem.
Right, exactly. And you need the resources to manage that, because you can't be focusing on that when you have priorities as well. So it has to be making sense. And for that to make sense, there needs to be something that can prove that. So it takes a lot, and most people want to jump. They want to get all that, like you said. They want to live that mountain hill life. They want to live in the best of the best with glass windows. It's all good in the movies, that who wouldn't want that? But like, do you need that to get to where you're going, or do you want that as an expression of giving yourself that self-evaluation when you can achieve that?
Yeah. And do you? And I'm just like, a person can ask themselves, it's like, have you ever really made sure to know what that actually feels like if you have something like that? Because a lot of times people have an idea in their imagination of like, oh, this will be so nice when I have this object or this thing. It's like, but do you truly know? I remember a good friend of mine, this was probably over 10 years ago. I was telling him, oh, I'd love to live in this particular apartment. Oh, I'd love it. It would be so awesome. He's like, Nate, you ought to talk to the leasing office and take a tour and ask them if you can kind of go there. And I was like, I kind of shrank down, like, no, I don't want to waste their time. I'm not ready yet. I can't afford it. And he was just like, okay. I wish I had listened to him, because he was kind of hinting at the idea of actually feeling, like being there, feeling what it's like. And as a result, you might find, I don't want this. This is not the fantasy I had in mind. The reality is not the same. And you start getting much more realistic. It's
exactly.
Like, after all. Yeah.
Exactly. And it takes boldness to actually accept that.
Yeah, that's right. Because now all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, I have to change my thinking here. So yeah.
Exactly.
I have to admit, it's not like you were wrong. It's like, it's all part of like learning and exploring, but there is a kind of like, oh, I was wrong. And so it can be very, very painful for people to go through that. Yeah. And
that's where tenacity comes in.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
It comes back full circle.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. Because if you're a tenacious person, you'll be okay with like, oh, okay, I need to adjust my calculation there.
Yeah.
Okay. No problem. It's not a problem.
Yeah, you didn't fail. You just learned something.
Yeah, exactly. Something might even hurt or rile up your emotions, but that's okay too. That's fine.
And that's where the best opportunities come, when there's a problem. And that's why when there's ever a problem, you can capitalize, because you can study and build that momentum that somebody can thank you for. And when someone tells you thank you for doing this, it feels so good. It feels like I've actually helped you, and now you're where you want to be. And you don't take the credit, you just let it happen, because you are that vessel that was used. It wasn't that I'm better than anyone. Anybody could have done it, but you did. So just accept that, be humble about it, and just make it better next time. It's not that hard. Yeah,
that's super cool. It reminds me of someone my wife and I met. She was a performance coach of some sort, and she said, teach what you have tripped over. Whatever your stumble was that you had to overcome, that is what you can now teach. So it was a great perspective shift in that regard.
Exactly. I like that. Wow. Nate, today's conversation has been mind-blowing. I'm so excited that you were able to come to the Playroom today and share your true knowledge and just give people insight on what they need to know, because the world needs better things like this. They need that inspiration, because you can get last year was one of probably the worst and best years of people's lives. It could you however, like, the scale could go any way and you have no control, but the control you have over being that person that you intend to be makes you want to, like, really know that there's hope.
Well, yeah, that's well put, and yeah, this is great. I was honored to be on here, and I love the exchanges we had. I'm gonna write a couple things down when we get off. So thank you, Faber.
You're welcome. Anytime. Is there any way people can reach out to you? What's the best way they can contact you?
I have a website. It's my name, naterifkin.com, and I write there a lot. And also I recently published a book called The Standing Meditation. And it's kind of like, if I want to, like, it's kind of morbid to say, but if I had to leave one thing behind, this would be it. I hope to be writing a lot more. Okay. But that's how I feel about this book. So people can find that at thestandingmeditation.com. But yeah, and thank you for that, because I'm always writing more, and my website's where I do that.
Awesome. It's a pleasure having you here, Nate, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you again.
Absolutely. I'd love to. So thank you, Faber.
You're welcome.